Tonight, the Prime Minister strikes deals in China on visas and tariffs. But did he strike the right balance between the economy and national security? Warm words between Sir Keir and President Xi, but were human rights a taboo topic in the Forbidden City? Also tonight, the government is accused of immoral behaviour after saying it would not offer compensation to Waspi women. We'll hear from a campaigner and senior Labour backbencher Rebecca Long-Bailey, who says her party should honour pledges that were made in opposition. Also this evening, murders hit the lowest number in decades, according to the latest figures, as shoplifting continues to soar. We'll discuss whether political rhetoric about anarchy in the UK is fact or fiction. And having a ball after our devoted Gunner PM gifts a ball to the Chinese leader. We'll discuss whether football really is the only truly global language. Playing the beautiful game of politics with me tonight, Dawn Butler and Emily Sheffield. They'll be here until the final whistle. It is Thursday. I'm Matt Barbet, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Good evening, good to have your company. The Prime Minister got down to business today, literally in Beijing, as the first fruits of his trip to China were announced. There was a deal on visas, a tariff boost for the UK whisky industry, and an agreement to share intelligence on illegal migration. In his sit-down with President Xi this morning, Sir Keir said he raised human rights and the imprisonment of British pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai, but made the case for a, in his words, sophisticated relationship. A significant and controversial reset of that relationship may now have been achieved, to the extent that Downing Street this evening declined to rule out inviting President Xi on a state visit here to the UK. Our political editor Beth Rigby reports now from Beijing.
This handshake's been a long time coming. Keir Starmer, the first British Prime Minister to come to China in 8 years.
To my mind, that's been far too long.
Here to warm up a relationship put on ice by successive Conservative Prime Ministers.
China is a vital player on the global stage, and it's vital that we build a more sophisticated relationship.
Labour's change in approach acknowledged by China's President Xi.
In the past, Labour governments made important contributions to the growth of China-UK relations. China-UK relations went through some twists and turns. It did not serve the interests of our two countries. China stands ready to develop with the UK a long-term and consistent, comprehensive strategic partnership. It will benefit our two peoples and the wider world.
A partnership tarnished by spying scandals and concerns over human rights. Starmer hopes re-engaging with Beijing can help Britain's economy. From the Great Hall to the Forbidden City, things pointing in the right direction for the UK. The Prime Minister citing progress on whisky tariffs, intelligence sharing on illegal migration, and a concrete win. British citizens will be able to travel to China without needing a visa. Benefits the Prime Minister's keen to sell back home.
And what I'd say to everybody here is that I always act in our national interest. And therefore the question for me is, how does this accelerate and deliver back at home? I know that whatever's going on in the world, the most important thing to the vast majority of people is the cost of living. So opening up access to business, opportunities, seizing those opportunities, which then gets reflected in better businesses, in jobs, in price reductions at home, really, really matter.
But there are difficult areas too between Britain's democracy and China's autocracy, be it the plight of the Uyghurs or the imprisoned pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai.
We did have a respectful discussion about that, raised those issues, as you would expect. But that, if you like, is part and parcel of the reason to engage. It is in our national interest, it gives us great opportunities, but it also gives us the opportunity to have those discussions about areas where we disagree.
It's a historic meeting, and it could genuinely prove to be a historic moment if it really does usher in a new and deeper relationship between the UK and China after what's been a difficult few years. The Prime Minister came here looking for a strategic reset with the world's second biggest economy, and President Xi, for his part, has offered the hand of friendship in what was described by the Prime Minister as a warm and constructive meeting. The prize is better economic ties, which the PM hopes will help people back home. The challenge is navigating between two warring superpowers, the US and China, and keeping both on side and persuading people back home worried about the risk of China that this really is a relationship worth having. After President Xi came Premier Li, Keir Starmer back to the Great Hall and greeted with full fanfare. The two sides' delegations here too getting down to business. China, a superpower the UK can ill afford to ignore. After a rough few weeks, Keir Starmer will chalk this particular reset up as a win, even if he faces resistance back home. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Beijing.
Earlier, I spoke to the Justice Minister, Jake Richards. Jake, good to see you. Let's talk about China first. What's the point of the Prime Minister going there?
Well, I think this is an important moment for our country to reset the relationship with China. Under the Conservatives, we had a hot relationship, then a cold relationship, and I think this is a pragmatic but sensible relationship where the Prime Minister is in China. We have to have a mature dialogue with China, the second biggest economy in the world, our third biggest export market. 300,000 jobs in our country rely upon our relationship with China. So, of course, it's right that the Prime Minister is there and is working for the national interest.
Let's talk about the principles in all of this, the morals of it. The PM of the United Kingdom, a proud Western liberal democracy, is in China trying to do deals with a one-party communist dictatorship. Is that the moral thing to do?
Well, we have disagreements about the political system.
I mean, that's a pretty fundamental difference right there.
And we've raised issues about human rights concerns that we've had, and the Prime Minister's been very clear that he's raised that with President Xi during this trip. But let's not live in cloud cuckoo land. It would be completely counterproductive for our national interests, for our country not to have a sensible relationship with China. And that includes also being a critical friend as well and telling them when we think they're going wrong, as we have today. But as I said to you before, 300,000 people, their jobs rely upon the relationship with China. It's the second biggest economy in the world. It is a global and emerging power. And to somehow pretend, like many politicians who want headlines, that we can just sort of shout at them and tell them to go away, that's not going to help anyone.
But when it comes to China, isn't it really cloud cuckoo land to think they're listening? Are they really going to do something positive about Jimmy Lai because the Prime Minister raises it? Are they really going to change their view of the Uyghurs because the Prime Minister raises it? They're not, are they?
Well, we have to try. Yeah. And that's why the Prime Minister's there.
But be realistic, as you say. Be realistic, they're not listening.
Well, of course we have to be realistic, but we have to try, and it's right that the Prime Minister raised that right at the top level with Chinese officials and Chinese president during this trip. But part of going there and having that relationship is to raise those issues. And if he stayed at home, which, by the way, Kemi Badenoch suggested that he shouldn't even go, well, how's that going to help? So he's out there promoting our national interests, raising concerns about those two particular cases that you have raised, and that's the right and mature and sensible thing to do.
Would it be right for President Xi to come here on a state visit?
Well, I think if President Xi wants to come and if we think that that would serve our national interest, then yes.
Do you think it's going to happen?
Well, I don't know. That's above my pay grade, I'm afraid. But look, we're not the only country that is engaging with this on this diplomatic mission with the Chinese. We've had the German president out in China, Mark Carney from Canada out there recently on a bilateral trip as well. So I think this is part of a realistic but ambitious diplomatic relationship with China, which is always in our national interest.
More on that interview with Jake Richards later on. Let's bring in our dynamic duo, though, for this evening right now, the Labour MP Dawn Butler and the columnist and broadcaster Emily Sheffield. It's good to see you both. Dawn, what's your take on the Prime Minister's trip to China and also what Jake Richards had to say there in relation to the diplomacy of the situation?
I think that's really what covers it all, right? I mean, our Prime Minister's very good on the international stage and he wants to ensure that you know, the United Kingdom has that position now, whereas, you know, for many years we weren't considered to be in the game. I think China's too big to ignore, right? So I think having diplomatic relations is the right and sensible thing to do.
If they're too big to ignore, the economy being the second biggest in the world, are they then going to listen if he raises in the issues of Jimmy Lai and the Uyghurs and other things?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I doubt very much we'll get into all the details of what was discussed, but the fact that the Prime Minister raised it is the right important thing to do. I mean, you have to raise human rights laws and offences in other countries. That's who we are. And so I think it's absolutely right that he raised it, yes.
Emily, what do you think?
I think it's right that he's opened better diplomatic channels with China. But I would just point to what is he actually going to return with. I think that's really important because...
Or visa-free trips for Brits.
Potential.
Better tariffs for Scotch.
So better tariffs for... So we're going from 10% to 5% on Scotch whisky. Now, that shouldn't be ignored. That's worth a lot of money to the Scotch whisky.
£250 million pounds. That's a lot of money.
But that is about all we're getting from this. And when Rachel Reeves went out this time last year, she also returned from China saying she had 600 million's worth of business. But over 5 years, that's nothing. It's a complete drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
And at the moment, you know, we have a huge trade deficit with China. And I think what I find confusing, yes, we do export to China. We export a lot. But they are also pumping a huge amount of their goods into our country, which is worth 70 billion to them. So what I find is, yes, we're not nearly as big as them. Of course, they're a much more powerful country than us. But I do feel, why are we not standing up a bit more to say, but hang on, you're pumping £70 billion worth of goods into your country.
People are buying.
Yeah, they are buying, but we are an incredibly...
It's not in isolation.
We are an incredibly valuable market for them. We are, and it just feels like, I think we do need to be really careful that we don't sort of roll over. I understand why the Chinese might be pretty cross with Britain at the moment. We blew hot and then we blew cold.
Yes.
But they are spying on us in an industrial level. There are real concerns about their embassy here. And I think that it's good that the opposition parties are raising these concerns. I personally wouldn't go as far as Kemi Badenoch and say have nothing to do with China at all. Yeah. I think that is a bit nuts. But we also need to be careful that we don't upset President Trump. So I think for Starmer, there is a bit of a sort of balancing game going on here. Yeah. And maybe in some ways, it's a way of sort of, which I think what Canada's just been doing, there's a way of sort of saying to Trump, well, you know, we've got our markets to deal with as well. It's not all about America. Yeah,
it's interesting. When it came to the Canada deal, Trump seemed to support it first and then seemed to change his mind. And he's not happy with Mark Carney for doing that. Dawn, let's come back to the sort of the economics of all this.
Just to say on that, though, like Canada's part of the Five Eyes, which the UK's part of as well, which is absolutely vital in terms of if we do want to pivot away from some of the things that we're buying from China, then the Five Eyes is going to be absolutely imperative to that.
Absolutely.
China wants to improve the Made in China brand. I mean, that's part of one of its latest 5-year plan. And as Emily says, they're pumping stuff here. People are buying it. People will go Shein, Temu, whatever it happens to be, and buy that stuff. Are we missing the fact that Made in Britain should still be an important part of the consideration when people are shopping?
Yes, and I think yes. I don't know. I mean, I've never bought from Shein or Temu. I've never bought from those sites.
We've all bought Chinese goods, perhaps unwittingly.
Yeah, of course, we all have, and that's why they're such a big market, because we buy.
Yeah.
You know, we import a lot, whether it's clothes, manufacturing, you know, goods, and you know, we import a lot. Should Made in Britain? Well, for me, when I'm buying something, I always look to see whether I'm buying something and it's made in Britain. And I always do that. I'm a very conscious consumer in that way. And so I think, yes. But we also have to be realistic about what we produce.
Yeah.
And
not as much stuff as them.
Exactly.
Basically.
Exactly.
But we are selling a lot of our services to their country. And as I said, my main sort of take from this is Keir Starmer, I think, knows he hasn't got a huge amount from this particular meeting. But, you know, and we had Rachel Reeves visit literally this time, not next year. Yeah. I think you are going to need to see an improvement over the next 2 years. Otherwise, why?
I disagree with that.
Why?
I disagree with that. I think, you know, 250 million for Scotland whisky trade, I think that's really good. 30 days visa-free. That's really good for business. It's really good for our businesses in the UK.
Yeah, although that was already in place for most European countries, Australia
Exactly,
and
but
others,
not us, but not
50-odd
us.
countries.
But not us.
Us now. Thank you for the time being, both. We'll have further reaction to the Prime Minister's visit to China on our new late-night programme. It is called The Wrap. I'm sure you've seen it. It's on tonight at 10. Here to discuss all today's big stories and the best of tomorrow's papers will be the Labour peer and broadcaster Baroness Hazarika and the former Conservative Cabinet Minister Michelle Donnellan. Next, the so-called Waspi women have had their latest bid for compensation rejected again. They claim they're each owed thousands of pounds after their state pension age was raised from 60 to 65 to bring them into line with men, but more quickly than they were expecting, perhaps. The Work and Pensions Secretary, Pat McFadden, defended the government's decision not to award them compensation when he spoke in the House of Commons earlier on.
The evidence shows that the vast majority of 1950s-born women already knew the state pension age was increasing, thanks to a wide range of public information. To specifically compensate only those women who suffered injustice would require a scheme that could reliably verify the individual circumstances of millions of women. That includes whether someone genuinely didn't know their state pension age was changing and whether they would have read and remembered a letter from many years ago and acted differently. It would not be practical to set up a compensation scheme to assess conclusively the answers to these questions. As for a flat rate scheme, that would cost up to £10.3 billion and would simply not be right or fair, given it would be paid to the vast majority who were aware of the changes.
I've been speaking to Angela Madden, who is chair of the Waspi campaign. Angela, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on Sky News. Look, just begin by telling us about what Waspi women have been campaigning for and why.
We've been campaigning for over 10 years now for recognition of the harm caused by the government not telling us about the changes to our state pension age in good time. Our campaign was based around proving that the Department of Work and Pensions committed maladministration. And we managed to do this over a year ago when the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman found, after a 6-year investigation, that the Department of Work and Pensions knew not enough of us knew about our state pension age changing. They decided to send personalised letters to us without delay, and then they didn't send them for a number of years. So women like me only got 2 years' notice of a 6-year change to our state pension age. And as you know, you need a lifetime of work to save up for your state pension, and giving 2 years' notice of major changes just isn't sufficient.
Good to clarify that, because you're not against having the same age as men, which used to be, well, it's 65 now, but it used to be women got paid their pension at 60, men at 65. It's not about having equality there. It's about the time you were given to prepare for that eventuality.
Absolutely not. The government decided to change the state pension age in 1995. They chose not to inform any women directly about that until 2004. So they wasted 19 years of notice time to us, really. They just disregarded our needs.
Now, the other question to ask you is, the Labour Party and the Labour leadership, who are now the government, they were making positive noises towards your group, weren't they, of actually you getting the compensation? What changed?
They were. Well, they became powerful. They had the power to do it and they chose not to. This decision is being made by very few powerful people. Most backbenchers actually support our cause. And of course, one of the things the Ombudsman asked for was that the report be set before Parliament, so Parliament could decide on our fate. But the government isn't allowing that to happen because I think they know how Parliament would vote.
It's entirely up to you whether you tell me your own party politics, but I'm going to ask anyway, did you vote for this government at the last election?
I did.
You did. So how do you feel about that now?
I feel very let down. I think this government, although it says it keeps to its manifesto, it certainly doesn't keep to the history and theory and base of the Labour Party.
Do you think it's unprincipled then?
Yes, it's on principle. I mean, the government can actually do what it likes. It proves that every day. And because it's the government, it thinks it's the right thing to do and it thinks it has a mandate. But what they've done to us is immoral. Totally immoral.
Do you think there is a reasonable explanation for why they are not taking the Ombudsman's advice and paying the compensation you feel you're owed? Is it the case that money is tight, pensions are expensive, people of your age, men and women, are going to benefit from the triple lock on pensions for, well, the foreseeable future at least? Can you see where they might be coming from on this?
No, I can't. I believe it's the belligerence of the Department of Work and Pensions. They are the most powerful department in government. They even told the Ombudsman they were not going to do anything about the way they chose to handle the change of the state pension age. They think they are right, and no evidence is going to move them away from that. We think the decision Liz Kendall made a year ago was unlawful. We had permission to challenge that in court. It seems this decision is somewhat the same. So we have consulted our lawyers and we are not frightened of the government. We are not concerned about taking them to court if, in fact, the decision they've now made turns out to be unlawful as well.
Well, you heard the anger against the government from Angela there. It's fuelled by the fact that many senior members of the cabinet voiced their support when in opposition. Sir Keir Starmer himself had campaigned for the Waspi cause before he became Prime Minister, as did Rachel Reeves while Labour were in opposition and before she became the Chancellor. In 2017, the now Work and Pension Secretary, Pat McFadden, who stood up there today, well, he posted on social media back then a picture of himself with Waspi women with the caption, "MPs campaigning for a better deal for Waspi women." Wes Streeting, now Health Secretary, tweeted his support for the Waspi campaign in 2017. And this is part of a statement released in 2016 from the now Business Secretary Peter Kyle, where he announced his support for the Waspi cause. Let's bring back in our duo for this evening, Dawn Butler and Emily Sheffield. Dawn, you're on the Labour backbenches. Do you support the Waspi women?
I mean, I've always supported the Waspi women, and I think Angela's interview there was very powerful, and it's quite palpable how upset she is. And they are so sort of tenacious in their campaigning. I know that this campaign isn't over, and I don't know how this will look like in the end. I mean, the government has done a lot in regards to pensions. You mentioned the triple lock. There's a new fund, £800 million fund to help pensioners. So there's a lot that government has done to help pensioners. But this is one of those cases where I don't think this is finished yet.
Emily, it was powerful, wasn't it, that interview? She mentioned power, she mentioned belligerence, not morality, not principles, not fair.
Well, I think it's a lesson for opposition governments. Don't promise what you have absolutely no intention of keeping when you get to power. And you mentioned the triple lock. Well, that was the Conservatives who brought that in, so Labour can't take any credit for that.
They didn't commit to it. Labour's committed to it.
Pensioners have indeed, through that triple lock, they are getting a better state pension. But I do understand the anger of these women. Women as a whole earn less than men over their lifetime anyway, so their pensions are often smaller. But I think there is a sort of reality here, is that, you know, the warnings did go out in 2004, as I understand it. That is still a pretty long time for people to have, and I think...
The coalition government sped up the process, though, didn't they?
But by 2 years. It wasn't... from 2011, you know, it was sped up from 2020 to 2018. That's only by 2 years. So you're still talking about from 2004 to 2018. That was a very long period of time.
I think the hallmark of all of this is that this Labour government is clearing up a lot of mess from the Tory government and from the coalition government. And I think that's just...
But you're not. I'm really sorry. You promised to deliver for the Waspi women, and you didn't. And you've just admitted yourself that pensions have improved due to the triple lock. That was a Conservative government. That was not a Labour government. That was a Conservative government.
But there's another issue here, isn't it? The Ombudsman looked long and hard at this and said there should be compensation, and the government have ignored that.
I think, they said the compensation should range from, I think, is it £1,000 to £3,000 each. I think
the total cost would be £10 billion to the Exchequer.
£10 billion. So, the government does have to be fiscally responsible. But I think the packages that this government's putting in place will mean that each pensioner will be £2,100 better off. But that still doesn't in any way negate from the fact that how Angela and the other campaigners feel. So I accept that.
But Dawn, there was a list there of all the people who are now cabinet ministers, from the Prime Minister and the Chancellor down. Peter Kyle is obviously in China right now with the Prime Minister. They were all giving their support to this. I mean, how many pointed to that? Don't make promises that you don't intend to keep. Pat McFadden himself was the one who stood at the dispatch box today saying this ain't going to happen when... 9 years ago, he was saying he was all for it. That's not a great look.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, government and governing is hard, right? And when...
It's meant to be fair.
And when you assess something and say, right, OK, it's going to be £10 billion, you've then got to identify where that money's going to come from.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say to you, Matt, that I don't think this is the end. I still think there's more talking to do through this. You
think they can still potentially right these wrongs? Because, you know what, there will be echoes for all the people of the infected blood scandal of Hillsborough. These things, these people who feel they've been wronged, being dragged along for decades trying to figure out how to make it right.
Yeah, and as I say, I don't think that this is the end of the conversation.
OK. Thanks for now. You're watching The Politics Hub here on Sky News. Coming up in a moment, we'll get political reaction to that decision from the government and from the senior Labour MP Rebecca Long-Bailey, who says the government should find the money somehow, she says, to provide that compensation.
There's a fresh look to your news from 10 on Sky News.
It's a new show called The Wrap, every night of the week.
We'll still bring you the day's biggest stories,
but with more lively debate,
more in-depth commentary,
and more of what you need to know.
Plus a look at what's making tomorrow's headlines.
The Wrap.
Everything wrapped up for you from 10 on Sky News.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
I've been getting some political reactions to the government's decision not to offer that compensation to Waspi women. Here's the Labour MP Rebecca Long-Bailey, who chairs the all-party parliamentary group on state pension inequality for women.
The statement that I put out expresses my extreme disappointment in the government. I think they're in the wrong place on this. They've let these women down yet again. It was clear that the Ombudsman's report found that there was maladministration and that an injustice had occurred, and the Ombudsman was clear that compensation should be offered by government. The government's next step should have been to consult with the women themselves at what that package would look like, not to effectively gaslight them, which is what happened today. So I'm extremely disappointed in the government. They've got the opportunity to turn this round and do the right thing morally. I just hope they take that opportunity.
We've heard from Angela Madden, one of the Waspi women, saying she thinks it's immoral by the government. Do you think this Labour government is immoral?
I think this decision is not the morally correct decision for a number of reasons. As I've said, it was quite clear that the independent organisation that was created to hold governments to account and advise them when they got things wrong, the Ombudsman, found that there was an injustice and advised the government to issue compensation. The government ignored the Ombudsman. Now, that's virtually unprecedented in our history. So the government is wrong on that level, but they're also wrong in terms of the response that was issued today, which seemed to dismiss the experiences of many women that were born in the 1950s. I've spoken to countless women who suffered extreme financial hardship. Many lost their homes, their health was affected, all because they weren't given sufficient notice of that change in their retirement age. The government of the time got it wrong, and we need to acknowledge that this was a state injustice, and when a state injustice occurs, those victims should receive redress.
Can you understand why the government has come to this conclusion of not taking what the Ombudsman said on board, not paying this compensation these women think they're owed?
I think using the excuse of not having enough money is not acceptable. You wouldn't say that to the victims of the infected blood scandal, for example, or another state injustice. The government should use every lever possible to ensure that compensation is made available to victims of state injustice. And there are a number of measures the Chancellor can use to raise additional funds to create that pot of money for victims of state injustice. Now, hopefully, that's something that they're looking at going forward.
What levers could the Chancellor pull? Because they're constantly telling us that money is tight, and we know the government, perhaps you don't want to, but the government has tried and not been able to cut down the welfare bill, for example, to pay for other things. So what levers are available to them?
There's a huge range of financial options available. One of the things that I've spoken about at length are wealth taxes. For example, there's a whole range of permutations on the table that have been advocated by groups such as Patriotic Millionaires UK, who are a group of patriotic millionaires who advocate for a wealth tax on the super rich. There are things such as looking at the surpluses, the subsidies that the banks still receive following the financial crash, a point that even Gordon Brown, an ex-Chancellor, has put forward himself in terms of bringing those subsidies down or cutting them all together in the same way that European countries have done, because the banks don't need that support anymore. And that would raise billions of pounds annually that could be put into our public services and put into a pot of compensation to support victims of state injustice. And there's a whole other range of options, which I know that we don't have time to discuss today, but they are there. The Chancellor just needs to be bold in looking at those and not use money as an excuse not to compensate valid victims of state injustice.
I mean, if you think this decision is immoral, if you think the government is lacking principles, do you think perhaps a new leader from your wing of the Labour Party would be better at this, would make those moral decisions without naming names?
Well, I won't be drawn into discussions about the leadership of the Labour Party because the important issue today is the 1950s women. What I want to see our party do now and the government is to bring these women round the table and start discussing compensation options. They've got a limited amount of time to do the right thing. These women are dying every day and not receiving the justice that they deserve. So the time to act quickly is now, not wait until years down the line when the leadership might change or governments might change. We just don't have that time.
Rebecca Long-Bailey, we are out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you very much indeed for yours.
Thanks.
We heard from the Justice Minister, Jake Richards, earlier, but I also asked him about whether the government had done the right thing in the case of the Waspi women. Let's keep talking about morals and principles when it comes to pensions. Jake, if your mum thought she was going to get her state pension at 60 and then was told different without enough notice to figure out Plan B, or didn't realise at all that this change was happening, is it the moral thing to do to compensate her?
Well, look, what the government has done has looked at the evidence again. Pat McFadden, the Pension Secretary, was in the House of Commons today talking about how they've looked at the evidence, that the vast majority of women in that period had received notification. There was also...
They say not.
I understand
they
that...
They didn't get the requisite notice. And it's not Pat McFadden looking at the evidence, it's Pat McFadden ignoring the recommendation of the Ombudsman, who said these women should be getting compensation.
But these are always decisions, ultimately, for government ministers. And there's a few things I'd say. Firstly, the government has rightly apologised for administrative failures that meant that some letters were sent later than they should have been, and clearly a small number of people didn't receive such letters. But secondly, you know, we have to be very careful about a recommendation which would cost the British taxpayer around £10 billion, which would have to be paid to all of that cohort, which includes many people who did know about the change and didn't make appropriate arrangements. And that probably isn't the fair thing to do. At the same time, this government is making real strides in ensuring that pension income is protected. This year, the state pension will go up by up to £500 for pensioners.
Yeah.
And over the course of this Parliament, several £1,000s. We're keeping the triple lock and we're protecting pensioner incomes, and that's the most important way to look after our pensioners.
We haven't got enough time to talk about the effect of the triple lock on younger generations and what the pension might look like for them in future years. But coming back to the Waspi women, you say it would cost the government 10 billion quid that you don't have. They say that in the intervening years, many of their number have died, saving you a lot more, saving the Exchequer a lot more than £10 billion. In some ways, more than 18 or 19 times that amount. The £10 billion outlay is comparatively small to what they haven't received in the meantime.
Well, I'm not sure I accept those figures. I haven't looked into those figures myself, but the facts are the British government have to make a decision today about whether to spend £10 billion on the compensation, which would include a large part of that cohort.
It's the right thing to do, isn't it? It's the moral thing to do.
There's lots of things we always would like to do in government, but sometimes you have to make difficult decisions in the national interest, and this is one of those.
The difference here, Jake, is prior to the election, plenty who are now in the Labour government said, we think this should happen. And now, you won't be surprised to hear, yet another U-turn.
Well, no, I don't think it's a U-turn. We've made this decision once before. There was a legal challenge, and we've made that decision again. And we've been very clear that we are determined to look after pensioners financially. That's why we're keeping the triple lock. That's why the state pension will go up by up to £500 in April of this year. That's the best way to look after our pensioners. And simply spending £10 billion, which would go to a large cohort who knew about this change and didn't make the required
you already said yourself, some of them did not know. They did not get the letters. And sorry is not good enough for them.
No one can identify that cohort within the larger cohort. So there's a big... And it's a difficult decision. I'm not saying these are easy decisions. But ultimately, when you're in government, when you're in Pat McFadden's chair, you've got to take what is a decision which is in the national interest. And I think he's done that, however difficult that might be.
You're keen to talk about sorting out the problem with prison overcrowding, and you believe you're achieving that now, largely down to the Sentences Act, which received royal assent just a few days back. This reduces the time some prisoners are going to spend serving their sentence. Is that the right thing to do?
Yes. We've learnt three things today. So today the government have published the prison capacity statement, which sets out where we are as a country in terms of our prisons. And we've learnt three things. Firstly, without the action that we've taken, building more prisons than since the Victorian era, a sentencing act to reform our sentencing regime, the prison system would be in complete crisis. So the Labour government took action. That was necessary. Secondly, we're not out of the woods yet. Capacity is still at around 97%. We're going to have to keep an eye on this and keep looking at it and making sure we never go back to the situation we inherited, where there was not enough prison places for our justice system to work. But thirdly, this does reflect on the opposition, the Conservatives and Reform, who have voted down every single change that this Labour government has made to secure our prison system. Under them, we'd be back to where we were in July 2024 with, simply put, a criminal justice system out of control. And that would ultimately let down victims who are watching your show, worrying about the criminals on the street. We wouldn't have a system that would be able to look after them.
Well, here with me now is our chief political correspondent, John Craig. Look, we touched upon prisons there and sentences and everything else. Let's go back to the Waspi women's situation, because they are tenacious, to say the least. They don't think this is an end to it.
That's right. They said that, in fact, some of the MPs in the Commons said today, this is not going to go away. If you think this is over, you're wrong. But the word that kept coming up in the House of Commons from Labour MPs as well as opposition MPs was betrayal. And, of course, you earlier in the programme read out some of the quotes from senior politicians who are now senior members of the government. Prime Minister, current Chancellor Rachel Reeves, the current Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, and others, and indeed Mr McFadden himself. So it wasn't in the manifesto, I think I'm right in saying, but it nevertheless, they couldn't have done more to promise they were going to put this right. And as a lot of MPs said today, towards the end of last year, after that Ombudsman's report, and the government said they'd look at it again, that raised a lot of hopes amongst people. Now, you could argue they shouldn't have raised their hopes, but, in fact, they were. And one MP wasn't not a Labour MP, but Steve Darling, who's the MP with the guide dog, Jenny, who's the spokesman for the Lib Dems on this issue, said it was a punch in the stomach, it feels like. They feel utterly betrayed. False hope was given. That hope has been dashed. In fact, there was a couple of MPs who said they were Waspi women, in fact, today. That was Liz Twist and Mary Glinden. So they're obviously upset about it. John McDonnell, as you might expect, never slow to criticise the government. He complained about betrayal and so on. The one thing Mr McFadden did assure MPs was that the triple lock is safe until the end of this Parliament. Well, we'll see about that. It's another issue I think you could probably say the government has handled badly. If they didn't have the money to pay for it, and that figure of 10.3 billion was mentioned by Mr McFadden, yeah. Why did they make such bold promises they were going to do it? Because they just caused such disappointment. And as for whether it's a U-turn or not, it really is a U-turn on a U-turn, I think, because the U-turn was to say they weren't going to do it, and then they raised people's hopes, and then they've done another U-turn. So can you have a double U-turn?
Full 360.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Isn't it? John, thank you very much indeed. You're watching the Politics Hub here on Sky News. Coming up, Donald Trump's claim the UK is in the middle of a crime wave with no-go areas for police. We'll see if the latest crime figures back him up. Now, if you listen to Elon Musk or Donald Trump, the UK is a lawless hellhole with crime through the roof. This evening, the Tesla CEO tweeted just another day in the UK in reaction to a report on the trial of 2 asylum seekers who were accused of raping a young girl in a park. At the end of last year, the US president claimed London was so dangerous people were getting stabbed in the backside, or worse, he said. This was him speaking on his way to London for his state visit.
You know, I have a certain pride in London and UK. My mother was born in Scotland, as you know. And when I see Mayor Khan do a bad job, the stabbings and the dirt and the filth, it's not the same.
Well, of course, crime happens, and all of it's serious. But Mr. Trump may be surprised to read the latest crime figures for England and Wales, which are out today. They show the number of homicides dropped by 7% to 499 offences. That's compared to the year to September 2024, where there were 539. This is the lowest figure for more than 40 years. For lower-level crime, the picture is not quite as rosy. Shoplifting went up to more than 500,000 incidents, but is slightly below the record levels seen in the 12 months to March of last year. Let's bring our duo back in for this evening, Dawn and Emily. And Dawn, just a few days back, you were posting online about mobile phones being nicked, which certainly does feel like it's rife, certainly does feel like a spate of those things are happening. But I guess these figures show there's a difference between the perception and the reality.
The perception of crime is always higher than the crime itself. That's like time immemorial. But as you said, it's lowest since 1977. London is safer than New York. I wouldn't listen to anything that Trump says about London anyway. I mean, they're doing that for their own
audiences.
Reasons. Yeah, they're for their own reason. They want people, they want to portray, oh, London's so dangerous. At one stage he said, I want to take it over. He's obsessed with Sadiq Khan, who actually, his approach to crime, public health approach is working. Violent crime reduction unit is working. Crime is going down. You're right, Matt, to say about shop theft and mobile phone theft, but shop theft was essentially decriminalised by the last government, by the Tory government. But this government has said, no, if, no matter what you steal, you're going to be prosecuted. And with phone crime, that has expanded over the last 10 years or so. But the Met Police are getting to grips with it with their Operation Reckoning. And so everything is being dealt with, and it's going in the right direction, which is good.
Emily, just before I come to you, just clarify that decriminalise shoplifting. You mean encourage police to turn a blind eye, or didn't have the resources to deal with it?
What do you mean by that? It was something like if you steal under £250, it's not going to be dealt with or investigated. And so people were going in and stealing stuff, and they weren't being prosecuted. That has now changed.
The thing is, Emily, right? Murder, homicide includes more than murder. Manslaughter is included, child death as well. But it is still, and always has been, relatively rare. Those so-called lower-level crimes, the shoplifting, the mobile phone lifted off your ear as you're walking through town, graffiti, burglary, those are the things that people feel and see more regularly. So they have that perception that enough isn't being done. And the figures bear it out with shoplifting, it's gone up.
I think that's very true. I would like to say on the murder story, we are hearing today about a 15-year-old who stabbed a 12-year-old to death.
When he was 14,
now,
actually,
he has been caught, but that's when I hear about those crimes, I think they are a sort of stain on our society, and they're a stain on London, and it's always to do with drug dealing normally. But to move on from that, it's great that these, much more horrendous murder crimes are down. But I do think the perception that you're getting now is that even if you report a crime, no one's going to turn up and deal with it. No one's going to get caught. And I think businesses are feeling... I know that the guy who owns the shop at the end of my road, he feels like he's endlessly broken into. And if it's not that, it's graffiti all over his shop. Now, these crimes actually cost business owners a huge amount of money on top of all the other regulation they're having to deal with. And I think what you hear, especially in a big city like ours, it is that low-level crime, which is you can't leave a bicycle out for longer than sort of half an hour. When my teenagers were of a certain age, this was coming out straight after the pandemic, but they were getting attacked in the street a lot. It was almost like it was a game. It wasn't even for their phone.
Or mental health.
And these were really. Yeah. And I had at the time the police commissioner, the then police commissioner, because I was editor of the Evening Standard at the time, and she said, we're not even hearing about these crimes because young people just were not reporting them. And I think if there's one message we really need this government to keep pumping out is report your crimes, because the police will react when the reporting figures go up.
And the police forces are all going to change.
Twice, so I can...
You what, sorry?
I was burgled twice.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so I've got first-hand experience of how the whole thing works. So.
Tell me more about it during the break, I'm afraid. Still to come on the Politics Hub, as President Xi admits he's a fan of Man United and maybe Crystal Palace too, and maybe a couple of other teams. We will look at Keir Starmer's use of football diplomacy in China.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent. I've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. What you see a lot of here are military machines, soldiers, devastation and destruction. What you see very little of are the locals, the Gazans, the people who used to live here, the ghosts of this town. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered. You have the black flag, you have the yellow flag, people were kidnapped.
Inside this convoy, prisoners released by Israel in exchange for their hostages. The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists, but here the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. There were tears and there was defiance. This land has been farmed for hundreds of years, but now it's a scene of conflict. Israeli settlers have come to this area to seize land.
They've taken the land that I inherited from my father, and my father inherited from his father.
What would happen if you entered?
Oh, we'll be shot.
This is a place where the past is cherished, but the future is feared. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Sky News, get the full story first.
There's a fresh look to your news from 10 on Sky News.
It's a new show called The Wrap, every night of the week.
We'll still bring you the day's biggest stories,
but with more lively debate,
more in-depth commentary,
and more of what you need to know.
Plus a look at what's making tomorrow's headlines.
The Wrap.
Everything wrapped up for you from 10 on Sky News.
So Keir Starmer's love of Arsenal is pretty well known, but Xi Jinping's fondness for Man United will have come as a surprise to many. He also claimed to follow the fortunes of their arch-rivals Man City, Arsenal and the FA Cup winners Crystal Palace, spreading his bets a little bit thin there. So the PM's gift of a match ball from last weekend, where Arsenal's title hopes were dented a little bit by Manchester United beating them, will no doubt have been well received. The match was a win-win for Xi, obviously. So is this just the latest example of football diplomacy in action? Let's bring in Dawn and Emily. Look, if I can mix my sporting metaphors, Emily, you're on a sticky wicket when it comes to talking about football if you're a politician. And I think you know I'm talking about. A certain member of your family used to be Prime Minister who supported Aston Villa and then somehow said publicly he supported West Ham. This is David Cameron. It's a tricky topic.
We're all allowed a little slip up in front
Not when it comes to your football team. You can't do that.
I mean, what was it? Keir Starmer said sausages instead of, I don't know what.
Hostages.
But football is different,
I agree,
isn't it?
football is different. But as we were saying, before we came on the show, I think there is something that politicians have to be really careful about, especially male ones, is football. I think women on the whole are given a bit more leeway on the football topic. But also, you know, it's because it's sort of a national sport and people really care about it. I also think there's things like, as a politician, you can't say you don't like a dog, or dogs, or certain pets.
Why can't they just be honest?
There are just certain rules.
Why can't they just be honest,
yes,
Dawn? If you don't like football, it's not the end of the world.
You seem unapproachable.
Yeah.
And
Dawn?
you've got to feel like one of the
Do you have a club, by the way? You can say you don't.
Mine is actually West Ham. You're not supposed to change your football team. That's the other thing.
No.
Once you have it,
Absolutely not.
so it's like that I followed my brothers, and I'm from East London. But I think sport and music, they are unifiers. They do bring people together. And I think ultimately that's what that's about.
It is.
Even though he's got 5 teams.
But if it's... I mean, look, we know the Prime Minister is an avowed football fan. Yes. He plays, he watches Arsenal, often, sometimes gets his own ticket.
Did he have a tear in his eye as he handed over the ball?
He probably couldn't wait to get rid of it, to be honest, seeing as United won. But I guess it comes down to the authenticity piece. I mean, you said you can't change teams. How can President Xi claim to support or follow 4 Premier League teams? That seems a bit greedy.
Well, I suppose he can do whatever he likes, really, can't he? But, the overall feeling when you support a team is you're not supposed to change your team.
Never.
Your team for life.
You can't do it.
Like your wife.
You can't... Well, you can... maybe for some people it's easier to change your wife. Dawn, Emily... A pleasure. Thank you very much for being with. You missed a trick not supporting Sheffield United or Sheffield Wednesday with that surname. I mean, that's
I supported Scunthorpe, still do.
Did you, Scunthorpe?
Yeah.
There you go. You didn't share that before we came. If only I'd known.
My first games were watching Scunthorpe.
There you go.
As a child.
And I mean, you couldn't make that up, could you? Thank you both very much indeed. That's it for tonight. I'll see you Monday at 7. Up next, it's the UK Tonight with Sarah J. and me, of course. Bye for now.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.